The ultimatum, the message that changed everything. The projection appeared simultaneously across every major city on Earth. A massive holographic figure materialized above New York, London, Tokyo, and Moscow. The being stood 12 feet tall, with crystalline blue skin and 4 arms that moved with mechanical precision. Its voice echoed through translated speakers in every language known to humanity. I am High Counselor Vrax of the Zephyrian Empire. Speaking for the Galactic Council, your species has been evaluated. You will cease all military operations. You will dismantle your weapons. You will surrender governance to Council oversight. This is not negotiable. President Sarah Chen stood in the White House Situation Room, surrounded by her cabinet and military advisors. Her dark eyes never left the main screen as Vrax continued his ultimatum. At 52, Chen had risen from poverty to become the first Asian American president, earning respect for her sharp mind and unbreakable will. 847 species have accepted Council integration peacefully. Your compliance ensures survival. Resistance results in planetary sterilization. You have 72 Earth hours to respond. The hologram vanished, leaving Earth in stunned silence. But in the Situation Room, nobody panicked. General David Torres, a weathered veteran of 3 wars, stood beside the president. His scarred hands rested on the conference table, steady as granite. Madam President, we've been preparing for this day longer than most people realize. What the galaxy never understood for decades, Earth's governments had received faint signals from deep space. Radio chatter between distant civilizations. The message was always the same: surrender or die. Every species chose surrender. Earth chose differently. While the galaxy assumed humanity was isolated and primitive, Earth had been building, not starships or energy weapons, but something far more dangerous. Strategy. Deep beneath the Nevada desert, Project Deadfall had been running for 20 years. Under the Arctic ice, Operation Winter's Teeth waited in silence. In abandoned mines across 6 continents, humanity had prepared for war. Chen walked to the window, overlooking the rose garden. Beyond the peaceful lawn, she knew that beneath every major city lay a network of tunnels, weapons, caches, and command centers. Humanity had turned their entire planet into a fortress. They expect us to surrender like everyone else, she said quietly. They don't understand that we've spent our entire history learning how to fight impossible odds. General Torres nodded. Every conflict we've ever faced taught us something. World wars, guerrilla campaigns, urban warfare. We never had the luxury of easy victories. The response that shocked the galaxy 71 hours later, Earth's response broadcast across every frequency in known space. President Chen sat alone at a simple wooden desk, an American flag draped behind her. No special effects, no dramatic music, just a woman in a blue suit speaking calmly to the galaxy. High Counselor Vrax, you have made several assumptions about humanity. You assume we fear extinction. You assume we value survival over freedom. You assume we will submit because others have. You are wrong on all counts. Chen leaned forward slightly. For thousands of years, humans have faced impossible odds. We have fought empires, diseases, natural disasters, and each other. We have never learned to surrender. We don't plan to start now. She paused, her expression hardening. You offered us a choice, submit or die fighting. We choose to fight. But understand this, when humanity goes to war, we don't just fight to survive. We fight to win. The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, Council species watched in bewilderment. Never had a species responded with such defiance. Vrax himself studied the transmission from his flagship above Earth's moon, his 4 arms clicking. Nervously, "They are bluffing," announced Admiral Vec, his scaled face showing contempt. "They have no space fleet, no energy shields. Their weapons are chemical-based projectiles. This bravado will crumble when they see our might." But felt uneasy. Something in the human female's eyes reminded him of cornered predators from his homeworld. Creatures that became most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. The Zephyrian Empire's greatest asset. The Zephyrian military machine had conquered 3 spiral arms of the galaxy without significant resistance. Their technology was overwhelming. Plasma cannons that could glass continents, shield generators that deflected nuclear weapons, and troop carriers that deployed armies in minutes. Admiral Vec commanded a fleet of 60 warships. Each vessel could devastate a planet's surface from orbit. His soldiers were genetically enhanced warriors, bred for combat and conditioned to feel no fear. They had never lost a battle. "We will begin with demonstration strikes," Vec announced to his fleet. "Destroy 1 major population center. When they see their cities burning, they will beg for the mercy of submission." The targeting computers selected Los Angeles. 15 million people lived in the metropolitan area. The message would be clear: resist and watch your species burn. But as the Zephyrian fleet moved into attack position, Earth's seemingly empty space became suddenly crowded. The trap springs' the first explosion came without warning. A Zephyrian cruiser simply vanished in a ball of white fire. Then another, and another. "Impossible," Admiral Vec screamed. "There are no enemy ships. Where are the attacks coming from?" The answer came from Colonel James Martinez, monitoring the battle from a bunker beneath Colorado Springs. For 15 years, Martinez had overseen Project Deadfall, the deployment of thousands of kinetic kill vehicles throughout Earth's orbital space. Not visible to most scanners, these telephone pole-sized tungsten rods waited in the darkness, powered, down and hidden. When the Zephyrian fleet entered Earth's gravity well, they triggered proximity sensors placed decades earlier. The tungsten rods activated, accelerated by small rocket motors, and struck the alien ships at incredible velocity. "It's working," Martinez reported to the command network. "Kinetic penetration is defeating their shields. The rods are too fast, and too small for their defensive systems to track." But the tungsten rods were just the beginning. As more Zephyrian ships moved to investigate, Earth's hidden satellites came online. Not communications satellites, but weapons platforms, disguised as space junk. Solar panels unfolded to reveal railguns. Defunct weather stations sprouted missile launchers. Admiral Vec watched in horror as his invincible fleet was systematically destroyed by an enemy he couldn't see. Primitive kinetic weapons and chemical explosives were tearing through technology that had dominated the galaxy for millennia. The ground battle begins despite the orbital losses. Admiral Vec managed to deploy ground forces to 6 major cities. Enhanced Zephyrian warriors dropped from the sky in armored pods, ready to demonstrate galactic superiority through ground combat. They landed in Mexico City expecting terrified civilians and scattered resistance. Instead, they found Colonel Maria Santos waiting with the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force. Santos was a veteran of urban warfare, a small woman with steel in her voice and tactical genius that had earned her legend status in military circles. She had spent months preparing Mexico City for exactly this scenario. "They want a ground fight," she radioed to her units. Let's show them what Marines can do on home turf. The Zephyrian warriors were stronger, faster, and better armed than any human soldier, but they had never fought in a city where every building was a fortress, every street was a trap, and every civilian was a potential combatant. Santos had turned Mexico City into a maze of kill zones. Buildings were rigged to collapse at precise moments. Storm drains became sniper positions. Subway tunnels held entire squads of Marines with shoulder-fired missiles. The Zephyrians advanced according to standard galactic warfare doctrine: linear formations, overwhelming firepower, rapid territorial control. It worked perfectly against species that fought conventional battles. It failed catastrophically against humans, who had invented urban guerrilla warfare. When predators become prey first, Zephyrian squad entered downtown Mexico City with confidence. Enhanced reflexes, energy weapons, and tactical coordination made them nearly unstoppable by galactic standards. They expected to secure the area within hours. 6 hours later, only 3 of the original 24 warriors remained alive. They huddled in the ruins of what had been a shopping mall, surrounded by the bodies of their comrades and the wreckage of their equipment. "Command, this is Squad Alpha," gasped Squad Leader Vorth into his communicator. Purple blood streamed from wounds across his scaled face. "We need immediate extraction. The humans, they're not fighting like any species we've encountered." The humans didn't stand and fight. They struck from shadows, retreated through tunnels, and reappeared where least expected. They used their own city against the invaders, turning familiar streets into death traps. Colonel Santos monitored the battle from a command post 3 stories underground. Banks of screens showed the progress of her carefully orchestrated defense. Each Zephyrian advance was channeled, contained, and systematically destroyed. "They're learning to fear us," reported Captain Rodriguez, Santos' second in command. "Intercepted. Communications show increasing panic in their ranks." Santos nodded grimly. "Good. Fear makes them predictable, and predictable enemies don't last long against Marines." The message spreads news of Earth's resistance spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had surrendered generations ago watched in amazement as primitive humans fought the mighty Zephyrian Empire to a standstill. On the water world of Aquinas, the subjugated merfolk gathered around underwater communication centers, listening to reports of human victories. On the desert planet Zephyrian, enslaved insectoid workers whispered about the species that refused to kneel. But it was on the forest world of Vidania that the news had the most impact. The tree-dwelling Sylvans had been the 847th species to surrender. To the Council, their leader, Elder Cathara, received the battle reports in her chamber, high in the canopy. "The humans are actually winning." She asked her aide in disbelief. "Not just winning, Elder. They're teaching the galaxy that the Council can be defeated." Kitharis' leaf-green skin rustled with emotion. For the first time in decades, she felt something she had forgotten existed: hope. The Council's emergency session on the galactic capital of Centrus Prime. The Council convened its first emergency session in 400 years. Representatives of 12 species gathered in the crystalline chamber that had witnessed the surrender of nearly 1,000 civilizations. High Counselor Vrax stood at the center, his blue skin now pale with stress. Around him, the other council members expressed their outrage and fear. "This is unprecedented," hissed Counselor Seth of the Serpentine Collective. "No species has ever inflicted such losses on Council forces. They destroyed 60% of our fleet with primitive weapons, added Counselor Hex of the Silicon Federation. Our technological advantage means nothing against their tactics. But it was Counselor Vrax who spoke the truth that terrified them all. This is not about technology or tactics. This is about will. The humans have something we eliminated from our subject species centuries ago: the absolute refusal to surrender. The session continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The Council faced a choice they had never encountered before: escalate to total planetary destruction, or negotiate with a species that had proven it could fight back. For the first time in galactic history, the Council chose negotiation, *. When humanity strikes back, the fleet that never expected a fight Admiral Deck's replacement. Fleet Commander Zara arrived at Earth with reinforcements and orders to end the human resistance permanently. Her fleet of 120 warships represented the largest Council military deployment in 5 centuries. Zara was a veteran of 40 successful conquests, a being whose reputation struck fear across the galaxy. Her elongated skull bore the ritual scars of her warrior caste, and her 6-fingered hands had personally executed the leaders of 17 rebellious planets. The Council grows impatient with this farce, she announced to her assembled captains via holographic conference. These primitive mammals have embarrassed our forces long enough. We will demonstrate why the galaxy kneels before Council might. Her strategy was simple and overwhelming: saturate Earth's orbital space with so much firepower that no hidden weapons could survive. Then deploy ground forces to every major population center simultaneously. No more cautious probing attacks. Total warfare from the opening moment. But as Commander Zara's fleet took position above Earth, she noticed something that made her pause. The planet's surface showed massive scars from the previous battle. Entire city districts lay in ruins. Yet, instead of surrender broadcasts, Earth was transmitting defiance across every frequency. Command, we're receiving a transmission from the human military leadership, reported her communications officer. Display it, Zara commanded. The main screen showed a human male in military uniform. His nameplate read Torres, and his eyes held the cold calculation of a predator. General David Torres sat in what appeared to be a standard command center, but Zara noticed the walls showed blast damage and the lighting flickered occasionally. Commander Zara of the Council fleet, Torres began, his voice steady despite the obvious stress of ongoing war. I want to thank you for bringing such a large fleet to our system. It saves us the trouble of hunting your ships one by one across the galaxy. The general, who learned from History General Torres, had spent his career studying humanity's greatest military victories against impossible odds. Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held off a massive army. Stalingrad, where urban warfare ground an empire to dust. Vietnam, where determination defeated technology. Every war teaches lessons, he had told President Chen months earlier. The lesson Earth learned is simple. When someone comes to destroy your home, you make them pay such a price that they never try again. Now, as the largest fleet in Council history prepared to attack Earth, Torres implemented the strategy that would become known as the Prometheus Gambit, named after the mythological figure who stole fire from the gods. It was humanity's attempt to steal victory from impossible defeat. The plan required perfect timing, absolute commitment, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. It was, in other words, a perfectly human strategy. All units, this is command, Torres broadcast across Earth's military network. Operation Prometheus is now active. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth, We're fighting to show the galaxy that freedom is worth any price. The battle for orbital supremacy. Commander Zara's assault began with a coordinated bombardment designed to eliminate all resistance in the first hour. 120 warships opened fire simultaneously, their plasma beams and particle cannons turning Earth's night side into blazing day. The bombardment was devastating. Military installations vanished in balls of superheated plasma. Cities burned. Mountains were turned to glass. By any reasonable measure, Earth should have surrendered within minutes. Instead, the planet struck back. The first surprise came from the ocean depths. Submarines that had been silent for months surfaced and launched their payloads skyward. But these weren't traditional missiles. They were kinetic launch platforms, accelerating tungsten core projectiles to orbital velocity using magnetic rail systems. The second surprise came from the moon. Construction equipment that had been building lunar mining facilities suddenly revealed their true purpose. Giant mass drivers, built under the cover of industrial expansion, began hurling chunks of lunar rock at the Council fleet. The third surprise came from Earth's own orbital debris. Thousands of defunct satellites, dead space stations, and discarded rocket stages suddenly activated hidden thrusters and navigation systems. Turning space junk into guided weapons, Commander Zara watched in growing alarm as her invincible fleet was engaged by an enemy that used the entire solar system as a weapon. "How many hidden assets do they have?" she demanded. Her tactical officer's voice shook with disbelief. "Commander, we've identified over 10,000 separate attack vectors. They've weaponized everything from asteroids to orbital garbage." Colonel Santos and the underground war. While space battles raged overhead, Colonel Maria Santos faced a new challenge. Council drop troops were landing in Mexico City despite the orbital warfare, deploying in smaller numbers but with better coordination than the first wave. Santos had used the weeks between attacks wisely. Mexico City's subway system now connected to a vast underground network spanning the entire metropolitan area. Every major building had tunnels leading to hidden supply depots and weapons caches. They learned from their first defeat, Santos reported to General Torres via secure communication. "These new troops are adapting to urban warfare. They're not making the same mistakes twice." "Good," Torres replied. "That means they're predictable now. How's the Underground Railroad working?" Santos smiled grimly at the reference to America's historical network that helped slaves escape to freedom. Earth's version was designed not for escape, but for war. The tunnel system allowed human forces to appear and disappear throughout the city, striking at Council forces from unexpected directions. They learned from their first defeat, Santos reported to General Torres via secure communication. "These new troops are adapting to urban warfare. They're not making the same mistakes twice." "Good," Torres replied. "That means they're predictable. Now, how's the Underground Railroad working?" Santos smiled grimly at the reference to America's historical network that helped slaves escape to freedom. Earth's version was designed not for escape, but for war. The tunnel system allowed human forces to appear and disappear throughout the city, striking at Council forces from unexpected directions. "We're rotating 3 full battalions through the tunnel system," Santos explained. "They hit a Council position, disappear underground, and emerge somewhere else 30 minutes later. The aliens can't predict where we'll strike next." But the Underground Railroad served another purpose. It was drawing Council forces deeper into the city, farther from their landing zones and orbital support. The trap within the trap, as Commander Zara struggled with the orbital battle. She made the decision that General Torres had been hoping for. She committed her reserves to ground operations, determined to secure Earth's major cities through overwhelming force. Troop transports descended through the chaos of orbital combats, delivering enhanced warriors to London, Moscow, Beijing, and a dozen other cities. Each deployment faced the same coordinated resistance that had bloodied the first invasion, but Zara was confident the superior numbers would eventually break human resolve. She never realized that every ground battle was being monitored from deep space by sensors she couldn't detect. Captain Elena Vasquez floated in the command center of the ESS Prometheus, humanity's first true starship. Hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, the Prometheus had been under construction for 20 years. Officially, it was an unmanned probe destined for Alpha Centauri. Unofficially, it was Earth's insurance policy. Council forces are fully committed to surface operations, reported Commander Lee, the ship's tactical officer. Fleet formation is dispersed and focused on planetary bombardment. Captain Vasquez nodded. At 38, she was the youngest starship captain in human history, selected not just for her tactical brilliance, but for her psychological profile. The mission of the Prometheus required someone willing to make choices that would haunt them forever. Signal Earth Command, Vasquez ordered. The fleet is in position. We are go for Prometheus strike. The fire of the gods, the Prometheus, carried humanity's most closely guarded secret. A fusion torch drive capable of accelerating the ship to 20% of light speed. More importantly, it carried 12 antimatter warheads, each with the destructive power of a small star. As the Council fleet focused on planetary bombardment, the Prometheus began its attack run from the outer system, accelerating toward Earth at velocities that would have been impossible for any known technology. The ship became a guided missile with the mass of a battleship and the speed of a comet. Commander Zara's sensors detected the incoming ship when it was only 3 hours from Earth. By then, it was too late. Unknown vessel approaching at impossible velocity, reported her sensor technician. Impact trajectory with the fleet formation in 2 hours and 47 minutes. Zara studied the tactical display with growing alarm. The ship was too fast to intercept and too massive to deflect. Worse, its approach vector would take it through the heart of her fleet formation. It's a suicide run, she realized with horror. They're going to ram us. But ramming wasn't the Prometheus's primary mission. As the ship reached the edge of Earth's orbital space, it deployed its 12 antimatter warheads on carefully calculated trajectories. Each warhead targeted a cluster of Council ships, ensuring maximum destruction. The explosions were visible from Earth's surface as 12 new stars blazed briefly in the night sky. When the light faded, 2/3 of the Council fleet had been vaporized by antimatter fire. The message that changed everything in the aftermath of the Prometheus strike. Space around Earth fell silent. The surviving Council ships retreated to safe distance, while Commander Zara tried to comprehend what had just happened. A species she had dismissed as primitive had just demonstrated technology that rivaled the Council's greatest achievements. But the real shock came when Earth transmitted its final message to the galaxy. President Chen appeared on screens across known space, her image broadcasting from the scarred but unbowed Earth. Behind her, the lights of major cities still glowed despite the devastation. Beside her stood General Torres, Colonel Santos, and a dozen other military commanders who had led humanity's resistance. "People of the galaxy," Chen began, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's sacrifices. For too long, your worlds have lived under the shadow of council domination. You were told that resistance was futile. You were told that freedom was a luxury you couldn't afford. You were told to kneel. She paused, looking directly into the camera. Today, Earth has proven that those lies have power only if you believe them. We chose to fight, not because we were stronger, but because we were free. And freedom, it turns out, is the greatest weapon in the galaxy. The camera pulled back to show the full assembly of Earth's leadership. Despite their wounds and the destruction around them, they stood tall. The council called us primitive, General Torres added, stepping forward. They were right. We are primitive enough to believe that some things are worth dying for. That makes us dangerous to anyone who rules through fear. The galaxy awakens. The transmission reached every council-controlled world within days. The merfolk began planning their first rebellion in 3 centuries. On Zarian, insectoid workers started organizing underground resistance cells. On Vidania, Elder Cathara called a secret meeting of tribal leaders not seen since the day of surrender. But the most significant reaction came from an unexpected source, the council itself. High Councillor Vrax stood once again in the crystalline chamber on Centris Prime, but this time he wasn't addressing fellow council members. He was speaking to empty air, recording a message that would be transmitted to Earth within hours. President Chen of Earth, he began, his 4 arms held in a gesture that his species reserved for equals. The council offers terms for negotiation. It was a phrase that had never been spoken in council history. For the first time in millennia, they were treating another species as equals rather than subjects. The new galaxy 6 months later, President Chen stood in the same situation room, where Earth's resistance had begun. But now the screens showed not battle reports, but diplomatic communiques from across the galaxy. The rebellion is spreading faster than our most optimistic projections, reported Secretary of State Williams. 17 worlds have declared independence from council rule. The Galactic Council is requesting mediation talks. General Torres, now bearing scars from the orbital bombardment, managed a tired smile. They never expected anyone to fight back. Now that one species has shown it's possible, the whole system is collapsing. Chen nodded, but her expression remained serious. The hard part is over. Now comes the harder part, building something better than what came before. Outside the White House windows, reconstruction crews worked to repair damage from the council bombardment. But around the world, different construction was taking place. Shipyards were building humanity's first interstellar fleet. Training academies prepared diplomats for galactic service. Communication centers established contact with newly free worlds across the galaxy. Earth had not just won a war, they had started a revolution. The legacy of resistance 1 year after the first council ultimatum. Ambassador Sarah Chen, the former president, had accepted a new role as Earth's first galactic ambassador stood before the newly formed Galactic Federation's inaugural assembly. Representatives from 47 free worlds filled the Great Hall. Species that had known only subjugation for centuries now sat as equals, crafting laws that would govern a free galaxy. We gather today not as conquerors, but as liberators. Chen addressed the assembly. Earth didn't fight the council to replace their empire with our own. We fought to prove that freedom is possible. In the audience, Elder Cathara of Verdania rose to speak. Her leaf-green skin rustled with emotion as she addressed the human who had changed everything. Ambassador Chen, your species paid a terrible price to teach us this lesson. Millions of human lives were lost. Your world bears scars that will last for generations. Why did you sacrifice so much for people you had never met? Chen considered the question carefully. Around the hall, representatives of dozens of species waited for her answer. Because freedom is like a flame, she replied finally. It spreads from one torch to another. Earth carried that flame when the rest of the galaxy had forgotten it existed. Now it burns bright enough for everyone to see. She paused, looking around the assembly of free worlds. The price was terrible, but the alternative was worse. A galaxy where freedom was just a memory, where entire civilizations lived in chains because they had forgotten how to say no to tyranny. The applause that followed was not the polite recognition typical of diplomatic gatherings. It was the sound of free beings celebrating the courage that had made their freedom possible. Epilogue: The galaxy remembers.